Well, thank you very much, and thanks very much for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here to share a little bit, I suppose, of my experience. That I tell everybody, first of all, I'm almost 34 years as a parent. And what I share with parents nowadays is that, as you know, you spend at least 20 years learning how to be a parent, and by the time you're on top of it, it's too late. And there's not a parent here, especially when your children will reach late teenage years or early adulthood, that wouldn't be absolutely, totally generous in sharing all their wisdom with their children to help them not make the same mistakes. And of course, if you haven't learned it already, you will. They won't accept one word from you. And they have to suffer on, like we did, to achieve the same results, which is an amazing sequence but I have a few little things that I'm going to concentrate exclusively on parents now, on the role of parents and the way we can, us parents can, maybe you do lots of things to help our child develop, which is also part of their education, and a way wider than the classroom. And one of the little things I came across a number of years ago, which I think is lovely to share with you, and it is this: children insist upon behaving like their parents, despite the fact that one strives to teach them good manners. And as I mentioned, there's a few, or very few maybe I should say, very few perks or advantages in getting old. I can tell you now. So don't be rushing it. Take your time. But one of them is, honestly, is that it is a lot easier to put life into perspective. And it's a lot easier to realize and to be able to identify the things that are important. And believe me, when you're in your 20s and 30s in particular and rearing a family, I'm telling you, a lot of the things that would be driving you crazy at that stage, by the time you're my age, you'll be saying, it really didn't matter. I was a right idiot to be so upset and so uptight about things that really don't matter. But I do believe that parents, us, all of us, we can do huge good or also huge negative and destructive things. So I think it's very important to keep that in our minds. We have the ability and the opportunity to do both. And sometimes we do that, both. We do great things and we do very destructive things. So I have a few little things that I share with parents that I think are that I believe from my perspective now, that would have certainly helped me a lot more if I had been aware of them and used them more when I was a young parent than I am nowadays, when it's too late. And I was supposed to say to you, the first thing is the present. Present is the only thing that actually counts. You can give all the time in the world, worrying about yesterday and why I didn't do something. And then lots of parents end up, when it's all over, saying that. God, it's a pity I didn't spend more time. It's a pity I didn't do. But it's too late. And the same about tomorrow. Sure, it might never come. And then when it comes, you mightn't be there to enjoy it anyway. So it's actually only the present. It's what's happening now that really matters. And if you could just keep that in your mind, it would make a huge difference in the way we behave. Second thing I'd say to parents is, I have two little measurements that I share with parents all the time when I'm talking to parents, and they're very simple, basic little measurements, but they do act. Nobody ever criticised me or disagreed with me up to now, honestly. And they're two very basic little measurements. And the first one is, I'd say to parents, listen, regularly ask yourself, is my child or are my children in good health? And if the answer is yes, stop whinging. Because you have the greatest gift, and they have the greatest gift of all. There's nothing that will compare or compensate for good health. So that's. And the second little measurement I have, and Sean mentioned it, and I just want to endorse it again and again, and that is the whole thing around contentment, enjoyment, happiness. Happy child. So if you have a healthy, happy child, sure, you're on the pig's back. Seriously. And happiness is something that we have a lot of control over, honestly. And one of the things I'd be saying at the very a very early stage of being a parent is, and this is tough for some parents, and I know parents who struggle all their life with this particular little requirement or demand or requirement, and that is to accept the reality of your child or children 100% from day one. Because there's nothing you can do about it anyway. But so many parents give all their life, I wish wherever you got. You're not a bit like our family. Whether it is the height, or the size, or the academic ability, or the sporting ability, or the looks, or the hair, or... Jeez. And so they give, for instance, academically, if the little child isn't very strong academically, what do? Grinds. You know, send you to grind. And the poor little child will grow up to hate whatever the subjects are. And the parent will die probably from blood pressure. Seriously, from absolute blood pressure. We go, it'll be the whole time. Straight. And this is linked very much to knowing and accepting the ability of your child or children. Another huge issue. Knowing, first of all, and secondly, accepting the ability of your child. Because your expectations can ruin the child's life. Yours now, not talking about the child's. And I know of a case, I often quote this little case, but I should also say early on that I'm a total fan of primary education and its philosophy. I would say if our second and third level could only inherit it and understand the philosophy of primary education and amend it accordingly, we'd have a fantastic educational system. Because I think the philosophy of primary education, and I'm sure it's not perfect now, but the philosophy of it is fantastic. And I go on occasions, and in the recent past week, I've been in a primary school for 2 days. And I am sort of proud, and I'm fascinated and delighted with the whole way the schools are run in terms of the children and the parents and that thing, happiness, contentment, enjoyment. And I said, if you could only bring that along. So in terms of the philosophy of education, but I know of this parent a few years ago who went into a primary school to, as Sean mentioned, to inquire about her son. How was he getting on? But he was only 7. So he was only 7. So he was only a couple of years into primary education. But her first question to the teacher was, do you think he's A in maths? Now I know they don't have that stuff in primary, but you know what she was getting at. Is he a mathematician by any chance? Because I'm sure she was saying, well, all my family were mathematicians. God help that poor child if he wasn't an A in maths. Seriously. Imagine coming home to that lunatic regularly with your results if they weren't up there at the top. Could you imagine? Couldn't. A in maths. So she had the crossbar up at the very highest you could go. And you see, this is the sort of stuff that I say we forget about. And we indoctrinate our children into this rubbish. And then we wonder where they get it up. Because I'm going to tell you a lovely little story now about, I was still involved to some degree, but I was involved a few years ago in indoor hurling out in Kilmacrokes in Dublin. And on this Sunday morning we had under 7s, as it happens. About 36 under 7s. And indoor hurling, may I just say to you, is fantastic for little kids. Why? Because A, it's very safe, and B, because it's indoor, 5-a-side, there's 10 minutes, 5 minutes even a game for each little 10, broken into 2 little teams. They have the little ball all the time, and kids love the ball. And so by the 5 minutes is up, they're banjaxed. And you go tell them, sit down there now and put in the next 10. And they love it because the ball, as I said, is intense, but kids love the ball. But anyway, this Sunday morning we had 36, and when I went in we had little different colour bibs to distinguish between the teams, red and green and blue and different colours. And every Sunday morning I used to pick the teams and say, right, you. But this Sunday morning they said, Mister, can we pick the teams this morning? And I said, fine, great. So I dropped out the 7 little bibs and I said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you're the captains, away you go. Start calling. So they were going away grand, picking each other anyway. And then there was about 4 or 5 young lads, under 7 now, I want to emphasise. There was about 5 little fellas left. Not little fellas, there was 5 left. But there was 2 lads, and they were big for their age. Big lads. Very big for their age. But I noticed that every time a captain would look, he would pass by those 2. And just when there was about 4 left, I said, oh, hold on. I said, well, why aren't you picking those? And you know, a couple of them said to me, Mister, they're no good. Honest to God. Indoor hurling with nothing at stake. And where did they learn that? They're no good, mister. Good God Almighty. That was the end of picking teams. Because the damage that was doing to those two little boys, very quickly they were going to learn, I'm no good. It had nothing got to do with ability. It was got to do with attitude. It's just to point out, I'm guaranteed those little fellas picked that at home. A competition thing, that competitive thing, and winning. Winning is fantastic, but losing is also important. How could you enjoy winning if you never lost? You couldn't. And so I'm always disturbed when I hear of some element of society that has a long sequence of winning. I'd be always praying for him to get beaten. Seriously, because it's important to understand what losing is, and to understand that we can't all be winners. Very crucial stuff, the sort of stuff I think. Anyway, because we haven't a huge amount of time, there's a few other little things. So my measurements, I want to just leave them for the show. Ask yourself occasionally at least, are my children healthy? And are they happy? And am I doing anything myself to create an unhappiness? Because sometimes, as I said, around expectations and all those sort of things. And I've gone to I'm at the stage now, and I don't know whether anybody agrees with me or not, but I am at the stage now where I'm saying to parents, listen, 90% should be around agreement and consensus and all that sort of stuff, and the old 10% for enforcement. Keep the old enforcement to the minimum. And I'm not a total idiot now. I understand that you can't, I don't expect you to be saying to the little 4-year-old at 12 o'clock at night, would you like to go to bed now, Pet? But I do believe, why am I so absolutely convinced? I'm convinced that almost everything you'll enforce or force the child to do, the first chance they get, they'll reject it. And whether that's sport or academic or whatever it is, friends, anything, they'll reject it. They'll get the hell out of whatever it is. And so forcing. Sean put up there, I just clicked in my brain when Sean put it up there about when parents can be involved, like sports day. Well, sports day can be a fantastic, enjoyable day for parents and the children, provided the parent or parents are competitive. Seriously. Would you imagine if you're a parent that wants to see your child winning? Or if you're the idiot that's going around telling everybody, well, my child is the best runner. It's amazing honestly, when you study parents, it's an amazing thing. The competition. How many words is your baby? 3. Well, mine has 5, yeah. No, seriously, and the more you get in tune with that, the more you say, Lord save us, look at it. Is he walking yet? How old is he? 15 months. Oh, Jesus. Huh? Something wrong with him. There's nothing wrong with the child. He'll walk when he's ready. Just leave him alone. No. Get up on your feet, quick. And we're inclined, honestly, in modern times, we're inclined to rush our children through childhood, trying to get them out at the other end. I don't know what hurry we're in. And many children miss a lot of the lovely stuff that happens by being children, living childhood. So the old competitive thing, just watch it. I keep saying as Sean was mentioning about reading, I'm a total, absolutely believer in reading and telling a story, but not any sort of reading. I've been saying to parents all the time, listen, when you're reading, will you read properly? Have them hopping into bed with excitement, but just don't be going through the motions. My thing about the consensus and agreement thing is about about transferring to your kids a love of and a passion for. A love of. And it's like that with reading as well, or storytelling, or whatever it is. That is exciting, and that their little minds can visualize what's happening, and all this stuff. so that they can. And just to endorse what Sean said, I just have to endorse it. You cannot pass your children over anything much greater than a love of reading. Remember what it is. It's a gift for life. From right across the spectrum of life. From learning to recreation to enjoyment to knowledge. Reading. And especially, as Sean mentioned, especially nowadays with so much emphasis, and it's fantastic. Technology is brilliant, but it's just that we forget there were other, we did exist without technology 20 years ago, or 30 years ago, or 50 years ago. So it's just that while technology is brilliant, we shouldn't put all our eggs in that basket. Chatting. I said I must have to mention chatting. I say to parents, will you chat to your children as much as you can? And I mean chatting now. Chatting is as a non-agenda thing. Because if it's not an inquisition or an interrogation. It's just chatting. Especially as they get older. Because if you do the old groundwork with 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds, when they're 14-year-olds, that old groundwork will pay back. If you haven't chatted when they're 3, 4, 5, and 6, you can't start at 14. Seriously, because they say, what is she up to now? What's her game? Huh? But chatting, and Sean mentioned it, and I must just endorse it, listening. And above all, I suppose, hearing. Big difference now between listening and hearing. Hearing. And what does hearing do? Hearing helps you to get to know exactly where your child is at. And that's amazing. And that's very significant. And sometimes we say, because we've convinced ourselves as parents, you see, we do, that we know what's best. Well, we don't actually, but the little child tells you he doesn't like something, and you know you do. Come on. I'm feeling sick. No, you're not. You're up. Get up. Ah, gee, no wonder the little child gets confused. Hearing. I often tell this little story because of how powerful it is. A friend of mine, when he got married, the last thing he used to do at night, every night after reading the little story or telling the story, just before he put off the light, just immediately before he put off the light, he'd always say to his little children, this time she was 4, his daughter was 4, and he used to say every night, the last thing he said, what did you enjoy? What was the most enjoyable thing today? Lovely little way to end the night, the evening. What was your most enjoyable thing today? What did you enjoy most today? And this night he said it to his little 4-year-old, and she thought for a few seconds, and then she said this simple little response, walking to school this morning, holding your hand. He never realized that walking to school that morning was the happiest moment of that little child's day. I bet he walked to school several days afterwards, holding her hand. Seriously, because he knew. And that's what I mean by listening and hearing and chatting. You get to know. And I keep saying to parents as well, and this is tough now, but I keep saying, and it's non-negotiable. It's non-negotiable. When your child at any age tells you anything of a personal nature, treat it with the utmost confidentiality. Confidentiality. Don't run out mouthing to neighbours. Because if that child hears any of that back, you're finished. I often share this with people as well. Our daughters and their best friend, we had a best friend a couple of doors up from us, but the two mums used to meet occasionally for a cup of coffee. And when their mum would say, I'm meeting Frances on Friday for a cup of coffee, she got the same instructions right through until into their 20s. And it was, and keep your mouth shut. Seriously, keep your mouth. In other words, don't be speaking about us. Confidentiality. And the second one I'd say to be, if you're trying to hold yourself around and try to contain yourself, is being non-judgmental. Because you see, it's not easy. But at the same time, if you, and you know the way we react. And so we demonstrate and communicate straight away how shocked we are. I'm sure if somebody does that to you, you're unlikely to come back again with another story that'll shock. Honestly, then we wonder why children don't confide in us and tell us. Why would they? Should they learn at a very early age that truth doesn't pay? Honesty isn't the best policy. Seriously. And we do that. We create that environment. So confidentiality and being non-judgmental are huge. If the child is listened to, is heard, they'll keep talking. Imagine if there was a survey done. We'll say 12, 13, 14-year-old kids, your children, age before or as they enter into teenage years, and a survey was asking a simple question: who would you go to? Asking the child now, who would you go to if you had a personal crisis in your life? Imagine if the result came back and someone rang you from a youth club or a school and said, listen, I have bad news for you. You're the last person. You'd be heartbroken. Honestly, you'd be in bits. You'd be saying, that's my daughter, that's my son, and I'm the last person. Well, if you run around shouting and roaring and responding, well, I'm afraid you'll fall into that category. Because I'd say that one of the greatest challenges for parents is to create an environment where the child feels safe and secure and confident that I can talk about any matter, and it will be dealt with confidentially and caringly and sensitively. And it's like that lady that Sean talked about. I'm sure that parent that busted into the school was full of good intentions, but she was a disaster. And even if she was right or the child was right, she was equally a disaster. Because the child was going to... Because I know a parent that her little son was being bullied, and she took off as well down to a neighbour's house where the perpetrator of the bullying was, and burst it in. And what happened for the little child? His situation was 100% worse the next day. Because all the rest of them then ganged up on him and said, Mammy's boy. So sometimes we say, hold on a minute. And I'm an absolute total believer almost for any age to consult with the child about it, whatever it is. To sit down and talk about it and listen to the child's perspective. And take the child's perspective on board. Amazing. And then the last thing I have to mention, because especially at the current time, a bit of positivity. God Almighty. I never forget this April, when for 3 days this April just gone, here in Dublin anyway, I don't know about the rest of the country, but here in Dublin we got the 3 warmest days we're ever likely to get. Beautiful sunshine. Jeez, everyone I met. Oh, there's our somewhere now. Where at? Positivity. And criticism. God, we are brilliant at criticism. And I never met a human being yet that loved criticism. Amazing. I never met any human being that ever said, God, I love it. We hate it, actually. So, positivity. Kevin McStay, some of you will know of Kevin McStay because he's a panellist on RT and the Sunday Game regularly. And he's a former officer in the Army. But on a couple of nights after the late Dermot Earley, Chief of Staff of the Army, dying, he was on Sunday Game. He was asked, because he knew him, about Dermot Earley, because he was also an outstanding Gaelic footballer. But the one lovely thing that Kevin McStay said about Dermot Earley was, he said the amazing characteristic of Dermot Earley as Chief of Staff of the Army, and in any position he held in the Army, he set out every day to find people doing positive things, to catch them working rather than to catch them dossing. Isn't that amazing philosophy? Setting out deliberately to find people doing things, positive things, so that he could praise them and say, well done, rather than sneaking around corners. It's amazing some of the things we do. So, And then I'm going to finish off with a little bit of philosophy. It isn't my philosophy now, but it's a fantastic piece of philosophy. If you want to be, I should have said this, linking it into, I never met a perfect parent yet. Now, if you listen to Joe Duffy, I'm sure you'll hear many people that would be, fit into that category, but you'd love to meet them someday, just to see what they look like. But as you all know, all of you that are very humble will know that you couldn't be a perfect parent. It's so complex and so demanding and so changeable. You couldn't. Because you have to be everything on earth at different times. And it's like the parent who feels that they have conquered it when they have the first child at 2 or 3, and the second arrives. And everything that worked with the first is a disaster with the second. But this little bit of philosophy, if you could put this into action, I'd say you'd be on your way to be a perfect parent. And some of you have read this before, but it's just powerful, I think, as a bit of philosophy for a parent. If I had my child to raise all over again, I'd finger paint more and point the finger less. I'd do less correcting and more connecting. I'd take my eyes off my watch and watch with my eyes. I would care to know less and know to care more. I'd take more hikes and fly more kites. I'd stop playing serious and seriously play. I'd run through more fields and gaze at more stars. I'd do more hugging and less tugging. I would be firm less often and affirm much more. I'd build self-esteem first and the house later. I'd teach less about the love of power and more about the power of love. Thanks very much.